Norwich City chairman Robert Chase was busy burning through all the goodwill he had built up in the 80s. Then they looked out on hiring Nigel Worthington, returned to the top flight, and via the wine-greased, blood-curdling screams of Delia Smith, had just about their strangest top flight season yet.
A message for the best football supporters in the world. We need a 12th man here. Where are you? Where are you? Let's be having you!
Unlike the three occasions previously, Norwich City wouldn't return to the top flight immediately. They were in this one for the long haul. The supporters continued in their attempts to hound Robert Chase out of the club, and that was only magnified when he brought back Gary Megson to become the club's manager. If you thought that was unpopular, then have the sales of John Newsom and Ashley Ward for nearly £3 million without any reinvestment. It turns out the club was £5 million in debt, and even the amenable Megson was calling out the board. It proved the end of the road for Chase, who'd been ironically chased out of the club. Well, hey, now that didn't mean everything was stable going into the 96-97 season. Megson left again, which paved the way for yet another return to the club, Mike Walker.
Number 5 now, this time scored by Lee Mills. The goal was uncomplicated, a through ball from Steve Guppy and a confident finish from Mills.
17 wins, 17 defeats, and 8 points away from the playoffs. It was all a far cry from the heady days of Premier League football, or even attempting to be promising in the second tier. It was a stabilisation that the Canaries ultimately needed, given everything that was going on in the background. Now Chase had gone, the mood was easing off somewhat, and that was helped by the progression of Craig Bellamy's development from the academy. Then you had actual new signings in the shape of Oldham's Craig Fleming and Wolves' Ewan Roberts, and what you got wasn't a half bad 1997-98 campaign.
Craig Bellamy again with the outstanding work in midfield, providing Coote with his first senior goal.
In fact, have lost more than they've won, but here Darren Eadie's away, and he's round the goalkeeper, and Eadie has scored for Norwich. Cause more torment here from the free kick. Oh, it's gone in off Jason Cundy.
Sadly, one player that the club bid goodbye to was goalkeeping stalwart Brian Gunn after 477 games as Robert Fleck departed again. A more frustrating sale was the departure of youth prospect Danny Mills to the freshly promoted Charlton Athletic. Still, with Bellamy banging in the goals and the club rock solid in being inconsistent at best, they were stable enough these days. Then Mike Walker just upped and resigned. With a relatively new board in place, they were always going to have different methods. That included appointing an outsider to the role of football manager for the first time in a quarter of a century. That man was Bruce Rioch, who had previously done wonders for Bolton, less so for Arsenal. The club grabbed themselves a director of football in Brian Hamilton, just ignore his shady past as an Ipswich Town player. Norwich were even earning what wanker YouTubers would call passive income when Mike Sherrin and Tim Sherwood's sell-on clauses made the club a spot of cash, a side hustle if you were. Ooh. Either way, the club started life in the 1998-99 campaign brightly.
Eric Fugelstad and repaid his manager's faith with the second goal, leaving Norwich a little short of midfield cover. But Craig Bellamy scored again to give Norwich a first-half lead.
It's Bellamy's fourth goal of a very productive season. He was in behind Murray.
But typically before the spring, Norwich promptly shat themselves, losing miserably at home to outfits like Stockport and Port Vale. No wonder they were ceilinged in 9th place. Despite the higher position, they weren't much nearer challenging for the playoffs, a whopping 14 behind the more upwardly mobile Bolton Wanderers. New season, new me, Norwich City would probably have claimed if the phrase was there, and there was optimism, but in record-breakingly quick fashion that was snuffed out. The season wasn't even allowed to start before Craig Bellamy's cruciate ligament imploded, putting him out for 9 months. Then you've got the still somehow worsening financial situation. Despite the multi-million windfalls of sell-on clauses paying out for Chris Sutton and Danny Mills, and despite the $3 million departure of Darren Eadie, Norwich still bled $2.5 million. No wonder the club regressed on the pitch.
Winner. And that proved to be the only goal of the game. 1-0. Marshall, though, could do little about Richard Rufus' second-half header, which gave Charlton all 3 points. Lesby's shot deflected in off Ostenstadt. 2-0 then, but Norwich paying a much higher price through that cruel blow to Mulrine.
After a lame 1-0 defeat to Crystal Palace on home soil in March, Bruce Rioch had had enough, resigning. Typically 8 days later, former Ipswich player turned Norwich caretaker Brian Hamilton was able to mastermind a 2-0 win at Portman Road against the eventually promoted Tractor Boys. He remained in place over the summer as the club simply had to accept a £5 million bid from Coventry for their star striker Craig Bellamy. Norwich could have done slightly better with his replacement, acquiring Tony Cottee, who 7 weeks into his contract decided he wanted to be player manager at Barnet instead. The Canaries wouldn't score until September the 12th.
Better after Lee Marshall's cross was converted by Jim Whitley's sparkling header into the top corner of the net. Wednesday, at this stage of the season in a perilous position near the foot of the table, we claimed the lead through Tony Crane's header.
Players forward. That's aimed towards Ricketts, who's got his head towards this one!
What a miserable campaign this was, save for the headline wins over West Brom, Birmingham and Sheffield United. There was too much by way of losses to teams like Burnley, Wimbledon and Barnsley. On December the 2nd, the club was back in the managerial market after Hamilton chucked the towel in shortly after another pitiful defeat, this time at Fratton Park. Norwich City had just been existing, now they had become crippled by a relegation fight.
Behind the Stockport presents into the path of Marshall, and that's pulled back for Zima Abbey. It was good strong defending, but Llewellyn's there.
New contract on the day City took on Wolves, but it was young striker Paul McVeigh who turned out to be the hero.
Nigel Worthington discovered the club in 20th place in Division 1 before Christmas, and his impact was that immediate that Norwich could afford to lapse back into springtime inconsistencies and still finish in a comfortable mid-table position. Initially hired as yet another caretaker, Worthington's results on the pitch demanded a full-time contract, especially when teams like QPR, Watford and Wolves were being beaten and the Canaries were suddenly holding their own against recent Premier League teams Forest, Blackburn and Palace. Whilst Hamilton had left behind Paul McVeigh, Worthington got to work in rebuilding a tired squad, Zema Abbey, Adam Drury and Gary Holt coming in for a combined £1 million. And despite Neil Emblen's horrible hamstring injury that kept him out for the season, Norwich got off to a cracking start in Worthington's first full campaign.
This is Mulrine, and McVeigh in a bit of space has sealed the victory for Norwich City.
Leaders Burnley, a side firmly among the promotion favourites. But Gary Holt's thunderbolt there after just 4 minutes.
With performances getting dragged out of Phil Mulrine now in his pomp and Ewan Roberts scoring for fun, Norwich entered 0-2, only a point outside of the automatics behind Burnley, Wolves and Manchester City. They'd only been eliminated from the Cup thanks to a sliver of ingenuity from Gianfranco Zola and Chelsea. The club had been hardened on the road, going to grim places like Grimsby and Gillingham and toughing it out for the 3 points just as often as they were pumping teams like Sheffield Wednesday 5-0. Typically though, it would not last.
At the start of the season, City would certainly have settled for 4th place in Division 1 at Christmas. Went into the break 2 goals to the good, quite rightly so after an enterprising display. Good passing move resulting in a goal for Alan Nielsen.
It was just so typical of Norwich for their form to fall off a cliff at the first sign of promise. After Steve Bruce's Birmingham delivered the latest hammer blow on March 15th, Norwich's lofty ideals of automatic promotion have been snuffed out in favour of clinging on to 10th. 20 points back on Wolves, you could forget about the automatics, and the playoffs, now 6 points in the distance, was fading fast as a reality.
When City scored what proved to be the winner. Steen Nedergaard with a cross, Darren Kenton with a...
All right. Ready through. Nielsen with a chance here. David Nielsen!
They finally had the Canary faithful really believing they could finish in the top 6.
Here's the corner towards Mackay and squeezed in from Nielsen.
Then Norwich clicked into gear. Gillingham, Palace, Bradford and Barnsley all sunk with draws against Grimsby and Wolves woven in to give the Canaries hope come the final day of the season. They went into the final day tied with 6th place Burnley on almost every metric, points and goal difference. Whilst Norwich had won 1 more game than the Clarets, Burnley had scored 9 more than the Canaries, so they held all the cards. Norwich hosted the already relegated Stockport, a wounded beast. Burnley hosted Coventry, who was sat in 11th daydreaming of Mykonos or Magaluf. A simple bettering of Burnley's result would mean the playoffs.
Got to go.
Now Paul Orford, this could be his final game as a referee.
Yes.
He off, he is off.
Follows his jersey.
Spencer with the punch, might fall for Gilmer once, a volley one, deflecting, it's the breakthrough! It's corner. Aim towards Malky Mackay, and Malky Mackay has done it!
Burnley had won, but they didn't win as well as Norwich had won. Therefore, by one solitary goal, Norwich had a second chance at Premier League life. It was definitely not going to be easy, as their sneaking in through the back door demanded that they face the strongest opposition in the semi-finals. Wolves, with their 86 points, were the semi-final opponents, with a potential chance of avenging league defeats against Birmingham at Cardiff in the final.
And Dean Sturridge for Wolves! High beneath it for Norwich. And the shot has crept in! Mark Rivers! Easton. And there's McVeigh! It's 2-1 Norwich! Free kick for Norwich City. Trying to double their money. Malky Mackay!
Because Norwich City, this friendly club from the country, Delia Smith's club, are going to the final. It's Notman's cross, it's Roberts! John, Horsfield, equaliser! Aaron Carter for the Premiership. The Premiership!
It was, as they say, a kick in the tits. Yes, they might not have been anywhere near the third best team in Division 1 that season, but to get so close to the promised land and fail so hard was just simply dishevelling. Just when Norwich fans started to believe, when financially things were ticking up, ITV Digital waddled over and kicked the club in the testicles. The money was never going to get better unless the club forced their way into the Premier League, and then the season had to start.
A long throw, not properly cleared by the City defence, and it fell to Gillingham player manager Andy Hessenthaler, his cross in turn finding Rod Wallace unmarked, and Wallace making it 1-0 Gillingham.
From almost running away with an automatic position in spooky season to timetabling their usual shoot themselves in the foot form come the advent of spring, it was just another Norwich City attempt at self-sabotage when the Premier League was on the line. And yet, as they picked themselves up off the canvas after 4 defeats in a row, it was right to remind themselves that, sat in 8th place, they had reversed harder tasks before, and with loanee David Healy, a small sliver of hope.
Come here to Mark Kennedy. Now he can deliver a good ball, does so, and the header in for 2-0, Dean Sturridge.
But we know it's the hope that kills you. Wins over Cov, Millwall, Wimbledon, Bradford and Burnley had bridged the gap from 10 points to just 3 inside of a month. Wobbles against Derby and Wolves hadn't helped, with the latter eventually promoted club driving the final nail in the playoff coffin for the Canaries. The summer of 03 was one of change, as the South Stand was demolished and sprouted back up in time for the new season. Meanwhile, Worthington added Damien Francis from Wimbledon before a monumentally bad run of form in front of goal had Worthington springing for the loan market. Say hello to Peter Crouch and Darren Huckabee. Now the campaign could get going.
Now for Norwich in the centre, Francis made a run through his Easton as well. It's Clint Easton! Goal for Norwich City! Here comes Huckabee. His first goal at Carrow Road.
A win over Crewe in late November planted the Canaries into the automatics, a typically satisfying triumph at Portman Road in the final game before Christmas, further bolstered by the fact that Norwich now owned the perch of top of the league. But the loans had dried up. Crouch was gone after a goalless draw against Millwall on December the 6th. Huckabee returned to his parent club a week later after smashing in 2 in a rout against Cardiff. So what chance would the Canaries have now?
Darren Huckabee, as Jagielka stuck to him. Huckabee accelerates away from Jagielka. Huckabee's low ball across the penalty area. Ewan Roberts!
And a glorious volley from Huckabee.
Every chance, apparently, since they'd pulled out all the proverbial stops to drag Darren Huckabee kicking and screaming back to Carrow Road to finish what he had started. 3 won in a row in February only cemented Norwich's position at the top, a staggering 9 points ahead of Wigan Athletic in third as a love of Valentine's Day hung heavy in the Norfolk air, and that was only rubber stamped by the completion of a double over Ipswich Town. Whilst wobbles at Cardiff and at Sellers Park had West Brom pulling level for the title, instead of dropping away like they usually did, the Canaries soared into spring.
Mulrine's cross, here's Kevin Cooper, and there's Darren Huckabee, and there's number 5. This, and now Mulrine. Mulrine's ball in, Svensson! Oh, lovely goal from Matt Svensson, his second, and Norwich's 5th goal is maybe their best of the day.
5 was slapped beyond Burnley at Turf Moor, 5 more beyond, Paul Merson's Walsall, and before the Canaries could take all 3 points away from Vicarage Road, promotion had already been sealed. It had been circuitous, not the immediate return they'd been used to, but Norwich City were Premier League again, and they'd really be entering a whole new ballgame this time. Norwich City returned to a much more cosmopolitan Premier League, and Worthington attempted to replace the experience he had lost in Ewan Roberts by acquiring names like Thomas Helveg, Matthias Jonsson and Simon Charlton, with a bit of Premier League quality flair in David Bentley apparently. They predictably wouldn't win a Premier League game until November.
With him, Henri's gone all the way through! Yes! Reyes! Milan Barros tackles his own man Harman and gets in the shot. Oh, what a great goal by Milan Barros!
Go to the penalty area, and it's towards Hreidarsson. Gets up well, and it's the opening goal!
When a Damien Francis double sunk Southampton, Norwich belatedly became the last club in the division to secure a win. It lifted them off the foot of the table and to within goal difference of 17th, which was ultimately now the aim. Their propensity to draw games was much welcomed. By Christmas time, those draws had dried up as Chelsea, Spurs and Borough all comfortably eased past them before the new year. Even if they had secured their second win against Bolton, they were still mired in the drop zone at the turn of the year. Something needed to be done, and that something was a club record £3 million splurge on a centre-forward by the name of Dean Ashton. On his debut away at Villa Park, he made an almost instant impact.
Driven in by Solano!
An instant impact for all the wrong fucking reasons as Norwich succumb to yet another pasting on the road. They put up a bit more of a fight in their next match, Ashton finding the correct net this time in a madcap 4-4 draw against the Borough. Staring a 5-point deficit to safety after another loss this time at Goodison Park, on paper the easiest game in the division was next, West Brom at home. Both clubs rooted to the foot of the division on 17 points, a win for either would have been massive. The Canaries went behind twice before a rarely seen spot of fight was shown, Gary Doherty equalising before Damien Francis' late winner. A match and a win that was enough to turn the tide of any season. Naturally, Norwich chucked in their next game 3-0 before chucking in a profitable 2-0 lead at home to Norwich City by half-time the game after. The morbid fans sloped to their half-time pie and pint, a rumbling could be heard from the director's box. This was probably the defining moment of Norwich City's entire season.
A message for the best football supporters in the world. We need a 12th man here. Where are you? Where are you? Let's be having you!
It should be noted this did not work. Robbie Fowler scored a last-minute winner to rip a much-needed point away from the Canaries. The reality was 10 games remained and Norwich were 5 points adrift of Crystal Palace above the dotted line. Then Chelsea, Bolton and Arsenal all manhandled the Canaries. Now the reality was much starker. Now it was April. Now Norwich were bottom of the league and now the gap was 7 points and 7 games remained. Only a miracle was going to keep City in the division. Then miracles started to happen.
The run, and Bentley has bent it in, and Norwich have the lead!
With the throw. Headed on by Ashton, McKenzie was there, Svensson!
20 points from the previous 31 games had become 10 from their next 4. Now only goal difference separated Norwich from the solace of survival that was 17th place. 3 matches remained, 4 clubs were fighting for 1 Premier League position. A trip to bottom club Southampton was next. A win would all but send the Saints down, back down to the hell of the Football League. The league winced, a nation braced itself, 1 point separated the bottom 4, and Norwich now found themselves propping up the division. Suddenly, Southampton were the ones in 17th. The clock struck 3 on May the 7th and 3 of the 4 relegation candidates kicked off. Dean Ashton's first half stoppage time penalty got Norwich over the line at home to Birmingham, and it ticked the Canaries over onto 33 points. Yet news from Sellers Park wasn't good. The London club were beating Southampton 2-1 as stoppage time in the second half was petering out. The Saints were going down, that was until Danny Higginbottom saved them in the 93rd minute. Had there been a winner, they would have sat in the more comfortable position of the lot, 17th. Instead, they both stuttered to a point. In the evening kick-off, West Brom scraped themselves a point from Old Trafford to keep themselves in the conversation. Norwich's goal difference being what it was, the Baggies were always going to be within a chance on the final day. Now though, things were just that little bit tighter. Whichever way you looked at it, Norwich City were in the driving seat of 17th. They were gifted 15th place Fulham, whilst Southampton had to host 3rd place Manchester United. Crystal Palace travelled to the terminally mid-table Charlton, and West Brom hosted 16th place Portsmouth. None of them had anything to play for, and it was all going to go down to the absolute last minute.
Now it's Radzinski, to the other way, McBride and Bowen Morte. Oh, this is Brian McBride for Fulham, and then score! That is Boubard shot. Oh! It's not away yet. Fleming tries to do so. This is Knight. Oh, he's crushed it a bit wide. Malbranc again. It's 4 now. Through again here. He's onside. It's Brian McBride. It's 5. Is this the hat-trick? Cole is there anyway. It's number 6.
Alright, there's no getting around it. That was a bit of a damp squib from Norwich's perspective at least. It would have been the perfect time to secure a first ever away win that season, but ultimately that horrendous form on the road cost Norwich City a spot in the Premier League. Funnily enough, it was West Brom's Rob Earnshaw whose goal on the penultimate game helped send Norwich down, who was the one earmarked to replace the annual big-name Carrow Road departure. In 2005, this was Dean Ashton to West Ham for £7.25 million. It was quickly apparent that the Canaries wouldn't be fluttering back into the Prem anytime soon.
For Alexander, his ball slid through, and a chance here, and a goal for Preston from Adam Nolan. Deep in, first half added time.
There we have it, we've completed our Norwich mini-series. Next we're going to go across the country as part of our Tour of Britain playlist, click the playlist here, and we're going to go to West Brom.